Hey everybody, it's Nick here. I'm recording you a little intro clip for a new segment that I'm doing within the Men's Corner. This is it's like an interview series that I'm doing with like both men in my peer group and in the community, and ideally other professionals within the movement, right? So I'd like to introduce Tony Lowe. I know him through the local MMA gym. He's also a personal trainer at BGSU. We had a very interesting conversation. We talk about unlearning hate. We talk about Challenge Day. We talk about Captain America, Black Panther, and also like the way that like toys like socialize and like reinforce gender norms, and not only just toys, but the way we're encouraged to play with those toys. So I thought this was super interesting. This is my first like interview release. I'm gonna try to release like for the future just like one a month. But if there's more interest expressed, there's gonna be like just like a higher release rate. So anyway, I hope you'll enjoy what we got going on. And if you would like to be interviewed, feel free to drop me a line. All right. I hope you enjoy. Bye now. So, what I was hoping we could do today was sort of like talk about your role models growing up. I know you mentioned like when we were setting this up, you mentioned like traveling for like 10 years.
Yeah, I did. I had a professional. I worked for a company. I don't mind name dropping them. They're hopefully coming back after this pandemic is over.
Yeah.
But they're an organization called Challenge Day I used to work for, and
Oh,
what
I know
they
Challenge
do,
Day.
yeah, they do workshops on uh, healthy communication and unlearning some oppressive notions that we develop just in normal American life, and figuring out how to harness some of that energy, be very fully expressed in emotion, and live a meaningful life, generate your own path and go for it, kind of a thing.
That's awesome. So, what was your capacity within Challenge Day?
Well, I was one of the people that would have a microphone and a shirt and a challenge day shirt and I would go into, at first it was mostly schools. It was always mostly schools, I mean, but at first it was only schools for me, and grew into something a little more elaborate where I was doing corporate workshops, keynote speeches, and then did some really, I worked some very cool opportunities overseas.
Cool.
There was a Dutch TV show called Over the Strape
Okay.
that I was honored to be on, uh, doing the, presenting the workshop, but filmed for Dutch TV.
Wow.
And then in Sweden, they had a thing where they had all of these refugees coming in, and the Swedish school system is completely different from ours, so it almost doesn't, it won't compute.
Mhm.
But the Swedish government didn't like how the refugees were landing in one spot and getting, there was kind of like a white school and a refugee
Yeah.
school. Yeah, so pretty much like it always is here.
Mhm.
Like
Right.
to that degree,
With
just
like
like it always is here. And here people are like, well, there's just separate neighborhoods. Over there they're like, no, separate really isn't equal in any way. And so what they did is they raised both schools to the ground. They leveled the buildings and everything, and they built one giant school right in the middle of where the other two were, and said,
oh wow,
everybody go to school.
that's awesome.
And so they just took segregation out as a possibility. Anyway, we were there to kind of help integrate and help people get along as they come together.
Sort of like facilitate like getting comfortable with like different perspectives, right?
To say the least, my friend.
Gotcha. Oh man. Yesterday actually, have you ever heard of Christian Picciolini? I think his name is.
Maybe, but I'm a face guy.
Okay.
Names always fall out of my head.
He's like a portly, like Italian American kind of guy. The important thing about him, though, um, he runs like these workshops for like leaving white supremacist movements.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's a keyboard player.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know who he is. He's a jazz musician.
Yes.
Yeah,
Or
but he also talks people out of the Klan. Yeah.
right, because he like grew up within the movement, was radicalized,
Yeah.
and now he just does like de-radicalization workshops.
Yeah, I totally know who that is.
Yeah. I was
Cool,
just
really
listening.
cool guy.
Yeah, yeah, I was listening to an interview with him yesterday. Like, very incredible stuff.
He's amazing, and he's so humble about it.
And just like literally, yeah.
Just made friends.
Sometimes literally all it takes is just like meeting someone from a different background, and like that breaks down the barriers. Sometimes.
Well, for me, I'm a believer that the number one way to defeat racism is just exposure to they exposure to them whom you are prejudiced against. I
Right.
know that as I am, and I think we all need to strive to not hurt people
Mm.
and not be racist. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think, no, I'm not racist. Yeah, you are. You
Yeah.
still are. Even you. Yes, you. Yes, you. And yes, me. You know.
Yeah.
And that was one of the last ones that I started my de-racist programming on was
Mm.
Asian Americans, because growing up in Ohio, we don't have a whole lot.
Right.
And I didn't know that I was racist against Asians until I moved to San Francisco and was surrounded by Asians.
Right.
And that's how we learn to unlearn our BS,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So if someone I make an assumption that someone who's deeply racist simply doesn't know very many people of that subset,
Or
or they only know them in a really bad context that is full of meaning for them.
same could be said for like homophobia, transphobia, literally any sort of phobia towards like, whoever it is.
Anything, man.
Yeah.
Republicans, Democrats, right? I mean, any subset of human. If you don't know who they are, but you think they're against you personally, you're not going to be so open to being pals.
Right. That sort of like circles back around to like one of my theories about like domestic violence and like the root causes of it. In my, just like throughout my research and like all the panels I've gone to, all my own reading, all like my independent thought generations, I've sort of come to a conclusion that like domestic violence starts with like dehumanizing and derogatory language towards, whoever it is that a person may be attracted to, right? If you start to think of someone as like not a person, right? It's easier to like start enacting violence towards them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult for a human being that we are tribal, community-based creatures, who thrive on creating a pack, a tribe, and functioning inside of it. The only way that our brains will naturally be okay with hurting people is to see them as a not person, some sort of other type of person, or a threat to what we see as the actual persons. Like
Right.
my tribe are the actual people, and that's the flawed, sick, dangerous people in that group.
Yeah.
And that can also just be, I have such a deep emotional wound, and my processing of it happens in such that whatever it is that I'm hurting from before, I see that in you. Like I see that on you.
Right.
And so we attack the thing, but we make that person the thing.
So Tony, I was wondering if I could ask you about how, like, what in your life led you to being part of Challenge Day?
Well, it's a very distinct chapter of my life, and I notice that I'm feeling I feel nervous that it'll be some defining thing about me, and it
Okay.
isn't. But it is a chapter, a major chapter of life.
Okay.
There's good and there's bad of it. My relationship to that organization is complex,
Okay.
and I say that exactly how I mean it. It's a fantastic organization. My relationship to them is complex, right?
Yeah,
So,
of course.
in truth, let's say I grew up with a lot of interesting, varied, traumatic experiences that are not the usual. It's not the obvious thing where I can say there was a terrible accident and
Right. It's
or
not like just a singular moment that can be like,
right. There was just a very fascinatingly deep, like I have a movie childhood, like you could make a movie and people be like, whoa,
oh,
man. So there was that. And then some trauma that I put onto myself, bad decisions and the usual soup of circumstances and predilection for danger or whatever. I don't know. Suffice it to say that I was kind of a wreck of a person, and I saw this challenge day program and wanted to shape myself in that. I was like, wow, everything that they're talking about makes sense, and it was this void that I had not had. And so I became very attached to it. I started kind of doing some organizing locally around things they were up to, and eventually they're based in San Francisco, and I had nothing here. Like my life was kind of in Ohio, meaning was kind of like not going well, like I was just like, I got nothing to lose.
you get stuck in the soup. Sometimes you got to leave.
Exactly, dude. So I sold everything I had and got a flight and like 1 month rent of it was actually Oakland, not San Francisco, but expensive apartment.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to get a job with Challenge Day. Now, they didn't offer me a job, right?
Yeah.
I just
But,
went there.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it took me about a year because it's very hard to get that job. I didn't know this at the time, but there's like hundreds of people were applying for the job.
Yeah.
And then they were on Oprah. So like the whole world showed up to audition on the microphone to be on their show. It's very not glamorous when you're not on Oprah. You're out there in the freaking inner city trenches helping people not kill each other.
Right.
So and turning over sex abusers to the local authorities, and it's not what you see at the program is a whole lot of love each other, and then the end of the day it comes around and like, all right, everybody, bring the reportables, and I'm not trying to make it sound scary. It's just that there's a lot going on and whatever. So my point is, that's what brought me out there was almost like I wanted to do my own personal growth work, and did.
Yeah.
And then the problem is after a while of working the road, flying to another city every week in a new town, and rarely a cool town. It's always like you're going to, literally, Falls of Rough, Kentucky, and you're going to stay in a cabin in the woods, and the school's an hour away and in a different time zone.
Oh.
And then, but it was like I would fly out Sunday in the wee hours, get somewhere, work in a school building or wherever they have us booked from like Monday to Thursday, and then fly back at night every week.
Oh no.
And
itself is like 70% commuting, it sounds like.
oh, it's terrible. So, and you're living in hotels and badly lit gyms and eating road food, and I started to get weird and weirder and weirder. And my time that I could recover and get back on the road started to dwindle. Oh. And I did real irreparable harm to myself. And it's not their fault. I have a very intense personality and a very intense way of psychologically interacting with the things that I get into. That's just my own trait. It made me honest. I mean, I don't brag about, I'm not good at very many things, but I really could, when I was healthy, hang fire on that microphone. Like I could really bring a group to damn near riot, riot for love and all that. So
a constructive riot.
Yeah. So but that same quality made it very taxing on me and my relationships. And I started to develop a lot of weird psychological quirks that were damaging. So I couldn't stay on the road,
Mm.
and I tried to work in the office, but that wasn't me. Uh, and I just couldn't make it work anymore. Even I cut my work time down to 2 weeks a month, and it was still breaking me. And I had to start over with something. So that's the whole challenge day story for me.
So, okay, so now I gotta ask, what led you from Challenge Day to come back for more schooling?
Well, I had an interim period where I thought I was going to be a fitness trainer, and I am. I actually work as that. But the thing is, when I was in California, I was really active. I was racing. You know what Spartan races are?
Yeah, yeah, with all the obstacles and
Yeah. So I trained for those. I did a couple of those and was taking it real seriously. Like wanted to maybe even race for money, but I wasn't that good at it, to be frank. But I was trying, and I was studying. I was getting in shape at this gym that did like prep for circus arts, so like Cirque du Soleil.
oh yeah, cool.
I was really athletic, but I also had a really bad relationship to food, which resulted in a bad. I followed a lot of bad advice, and I wanted to help people in that way that I had kind of gotten screwed up. But I knew I couldn't keep working the road. And I thought, well, the other thing I know about is this fitness thing, because that was like an obsession, all this stuff about nutrition. And
Mm.
I ended up getting a personal trainer certification from the National Academy of Sports Medicine, and then a nutrition certification through another organization. And then I thought, well, this wasn't cutting it. In the San Francisco Bay Area, I went from feeling pretty cozy money wise when I was working for Challenge Day, and then I was broke, like scared broke. Like I'm working at the gym 16 hours a day, and I'm going to my boss like, man, rent's coming. Is there any way you can float me a 20? Like just really pathetic. And had to rethink some stuff and came back to college to get a degree in dietetics. I thought I'll just be a registered dietitian,
Mm.
because I'm almost there. I know a lot about food science.
Just need to like finish off the official certifications and all that, right?
Well, no, being a dietitian ain't no joke. Like you got to know. Like I spent, out in that science lab. It goes from like, gee, I heard that this kind of diet will help you lose body fat, to like, let's watch stuff oxidize in a petri dish every which way it can, and then like it's different. Okay. So what I figured out really quickly was that it wasn't speaking to my spirit.
Mhm.
That the thing that got me into Challenge Day was the truer part of me, despite my abuse of the privilege internally, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's like
in a way.
I found the fire. It's
Right.
just that I'm a moth and I went in. Like,
Yeah. It's like,
so
yeah, you've
it
got what
doesn't
you want.
change
It's
the
like,
fire is okay, but don't fly into the fire. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. But I thought, well, what would I do? I started to think differently. I was like, well, what would it be like if I did exactly, and I mean, like, screw everybody. What if I did exactly what I want?
yeah. What?
Because I think if I do what I want, it will reveal something about what I can do for others.
Okay. I like this thought.
Right. Because no matter what I decide to do for others, which is cool and everything, and it's really wonderful. It's nice when you're at a party and you want to like virtue signal. You can talk about all the good you do. Cool. That said,
It's the ego. Yeah.
the most good I can do will never be realized uh, unless I am the best I can be at whatever something is.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
And so I was already back here. I came back to Ohio because only for college. I do not want to live in this state. No offense, Ohio and Ohioans. You're wonderful people, but no, I can't live places where you die from being outside. You know what I mean? Like, that's dumb. I'm sorry. I came back here for the dietetics thing. They have a great program here. And then I was like, man, if I did what I wanted, I'd probably just like study poetry and play my guitar. And I was like, well, what do I want to do all day for a living? And I was thinking, I just want to talk about this stuff. Like, I want to talk about all the stuff that I love. And I figured out really quick, like, I kind of like college. Like, I kind of like being here. You know, like, I like being on campus, and I like the library, and I like this place.
Just the aspects of like academia, yeah.
And the challenge. I like challenging truths. Like, here's what we think we know. Really? Why? You know, why do we think we know that? Anyway, I fell into the American Culture Studies program. They have a pop culture program, but that doesn't really go enough into like plugging into society. It's more like, look, you know, that's more of a very deep dive into the shallower things.
Yeah.
Where I wanted to do kind of a deep dive into some shallow waters that have a current, like something that can pull you into deeper waters shall you desire to go. And as much as I love the history of Marvel, and I love the history of electric music, musical instruments, I understand those through a lens of a deeper cultural understanding of the times.
And like why those certain innovations led to what they are now, or
Yeah.
why the sort of like, well, like with the Marvel stuff too, nuclear fears, right?
Oh, for sure. Major nuclear fears, and you know, the Cold War, the role that Captain America played in the 40s versus the 50s and 60s.
Like there's that cover of him just punching Hitler. I'm like, what is it, the first issue or?
That's what he was for. He was a propaganda tool, literally.
Yeah.
And
Oh, you don't say.
yeah, I mean that, but it was a cool one,
Yeah.
right? Because that meant something different then. Like, he wasn't celebrating some war by proxy in Guatemala. You know what I mean? Like, he was talking about, we need to get more pissed at Hitler than we are. Like,
Yeah. A unified entire cultural effort almost.
yeah, exactly. So then what's great is, what I like about it is, he's kind of a doubly noble character, because he comes back in the 60s when it's decidedly really not, it's pretty tone deaf to be nationalistic in the 60s, with people being fire hosed in the streets and dogs biting them as people try to beg for their own freaking fountain to be a human fountain, you know, like, just
Literally be able to eat lunch somewhere.
right. And that's where Black Panther comes from. So, just really fast, I know we've gone on a crazy segue. I know I'll get to that questions you really wanted to ask me, but
no, I mean, this is great. This is like, you know, honestly, this is the sort of thing I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of the Black Panther character is he was released in the year 1966. That was the same year that the Black Panther Party rose to prominence.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's not a mistake.
No, absolutely not.
Stan Lee over and over again showed up for culture ahead of everyone. So Black Panther was there to save Captain America.
Really?
Yeah.
Did not know about that part.
Captain America would get his little red, white, and blue butt handed to him, and Black Panther would show up and be like, yo, Mr. America, you are still relevant, but you're going to need me. Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. You're relevant, America, but you ain't going to survive unless you get right with me.
America's got to be a more multifaceted, like, communal effort almost.
Well, also, in real life, the nationalistic mindset would be opposed to the Black Panthers, right?
Exactly. An outside
Right.
group of like commonly oppressed people.
But this is only in the minds of popular thinking. right? Like in the collective mind of America. So Stan Lee was creating representational characters to show a different narrative for what America could look like, where maybe Captain America, the America that beat the Nazis, shouldn't be tramping down on people because of some perceived race thing, this construct of race that's allowing us to other people, like we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
and crush them and crush their rights, you know?
Yeah.
And so the idea that the Black Panthers were the ones who were going to save America, like even as their character names, right?
It's
The
a
Black
radical idea.
Panthers are
Yeah.
going to save America. And what Americans didn't know was that the real Black Panthers were fighting for education and everything. If you ever want to have some fun, like, you know, this is us unlearning racism.
Mm.
When I grew up thinking of the Black Panthers, you just see these angry black men with guns.
Right.
That's what you thought.
Right.
And even if you're like, no, I know better than that, the best you know is probably just, it's got to be more complicated than that. They probably were pissed about something legit. Well, yeah, they were. And they weren't angry black people. They were motivated Americans trying to get good things for American people. They're trying to get rights for American people.
And I also know about like the mutual aid efforts that they were doing, with like the community breakfast for like kids going to school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like the most do-gooding group.
Yeah.
Killed, by the way, for their efforts.
Have you
So you wanted to talk about, like, what did you want to talk about? Gender or something?
Well, yeah. Let's circle back a bit. I was wondering, let's talk about like, you know, just like role models and whatnot, like, you know, who you learned how to be a man from when you were growing up. Be like people you know, like pop culture, movies, whatever, you know?
Yes.
Yes.
We start learning how to be a man or a woman or whatever before we're born.
Right. There's all the choices parents make, like, you know.
Yeah, what I mean is, like, you know, I mean, look at now, they market the whole like gender reveal thing. It's the parents are gearing up to start to shape your brain before you're even a brain, you know, buying the pink and the blue and the, you know, where did I learn how to be a man? I think first we have to identify which version of being a man we're talking about, right?
Okay.
And what it is to be a role model, to direct one toward that end. And what I'm saying is, I think of the nature of being a man in the context of American learning of it in school and in life and in the culture. And I look at it like we exist on 3 separate spectrums, and it's even more elaborate than 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I boil it down to 3 in my own simplification so that I can try to get a grip on it. Because there's man that is the biological spectrum, you know, and this is dictated by physicalness, you know, hormones, those tendencies.
What you're born with, like physically, and
Yeah, but also all of these things interconnect and are influenced by one another. So like even whatever you're born with physically is to a degree shaped by what you do with that.
Mm.
So if you have like a physical, let's just go really fast. So physical spectrum up here, right? And the most obvious thing is penis, vagina, right? Like, I mean, you know, like one or the other. And that's usually where most people's understanding of the thing stops completely. Everything else to them is a metaphor.
Right. Because my immediate thought right there is like, yo, what about intersex people?
Okay, but you and I are intersex people in a way, right? Now I know.
Let's expand.
Yeah. So let's look at it. Forget about the sex organs.
Hmm.
The rest of us, right? The rest of the body. So what are we talking about with physicalness besides just that? Hmm. So you take physical size. Men are going to have a greater generally. This is all generally.
Hmm.
Generally bigger bodies, right?
Right.
Generally, all the physiological differences, more muscle mass per pound of weight, denser bones, different kinds of hair. The hair recedes in a different way, or adipose tissue stored somewhere else, the width of the shoulders, the width of the jaw and the head, the depth of voice. These are all physical things that are on a spectrum, right? Some people are bigger than other people. I mean, this is all just very obvious.
Right.
And we can draw some hard lines, like men, women. Men are bigger, right? Like we can say generally, usually, most of the time.
Yeah. For all these guidelines, we form our perceptions.
Yeah. Now, which therein lies the rub, because our perceptions are things that happen in the brain. And being a physical male also means having a physically slightly different brain. Now, these are trends. So they're not etched in stone. But there are studies, and this was going to be a casual talk, so it's not like I brought studies or something.
Yeah, of course. I'm not looking for citations,
But you would, men, you can say men's brains connect more neurological pathways, right, between the front and back. Now, these are arguments that are made. I'm making for you two different arguments. Because there's arguments that are made by people who just think it's nothing but physical.
Okay.
And there's people who make arguments that sex and gender and all that is all, or they'll say sex is physical, gender is entirely a construct. And the reason that it's complicated is because they're all right and they're all wrong. Like Americans love the good guys, bad guys, and sides and tribes to join. And life isn't that simple. Right. So if my brain, if my neural pathways are connecting this way, I have a disadvantage in interpersonal processing, emotional understanding, which connects this way. But I have an increased capacity for spatial awareness and moving things through space, physics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I can process those things very quickly.
So, quick tangent. Do you think that's why, like, traditional, like, male jobs include, like, plumber or mechanic or, soldier, that sort of thing?
Well, hold that thought.
Okay.
So if I have more connections going this way, so if I have a tendency to make these connections, right, I may have a disadvantage in those spatial things, but I may have a strong advantage in communications and understanding what's going on between human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I said that these things are influenced by social constructs is that if I hormonally, like if I'm a child, I probably don't have that hormonal soup yet that's tying all this together.
Right. Because
our people who raise us do have expectations that are social constructs about what our physicality means for us, and they start to operate on those. So like, oh, he's a boy, I can tell, because penis, obvious. Get him trucks, get him the color blue, get him He-Man, and right.
Yeah, put a football helmet up in the room and
all that.
Yeah,
and the one who gets assigned female gendering gets all the other stuff, the little Barbie and the dollhouse and the pink, right?
Yeah.
This is before that hormonal soup ever happens.
Yeah. But you're getting all these codes that are like, this is what's expected. And
so let's say that when children start to play, they're very youngest, right? The very youngest they begin to play, they already have the toys to start to shape them, right? Children play to learn, to shape their minds. That's what learning is for. And what one has to understand is the way we learn is not as much by generating new, knowledge is not it's not zeros and ones like in a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you know is actually a physical spot, a place in your brain. And the way you learn is by forming big concepts. You understand the concept of a thing before you know any words of a thing, right? Before you know what bird means, you see one,
Right.
right? As you expand upon the understanding of bird, then you start to cut away bits of knowledge that are no longer useful to the concept of bird.
Mhm.
And so a pathway forms that's more direct to beak, wing, right?
Mhm.
These things have, your meanings get smaller and you package them better.
It's almost like understanding what a bird is and everything that makes up a bird versus understanding what it is not.
Right. So you see a flying object, right? And you have the concept of bird. Eventually you get the language and you catch on bird, right?
Yeah.
Then one day you see a butterfly. It checks all the boxes for bird.
Yeah.
Bird. And someone says, no, butterfly. And now you have to find a difference. What differentiates bird, butterfly? And you start to snip those synapses. Eventually, when you see a butterfly, you don't think bird, no, butterfly. You
Right.
just go, butterfly, right?
Yeah. Distinct.
That's because you have now an efficient connection.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know this is really long-winded and I apologize.
No, this is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say you're a child and all your brain is like, you're driven to do things, right? Like, I want to play with something because I'm trying to form understanding around something. And my brain is compelling me to take this little hunk of plastic, a toy.
Mhm.
I have an object and I'm wanting to manipulate it through hole in a box, right? Like, I want to put the thing in the hole and see, oh, look, it goes through. Like, you're forming the world works, this is how it goes. If I'm a boy and my toy is a car in a garage
Mhm.
versus a girl whose toy is a piece of plastic made into a doll and it's in a dollhouse.
Yeah.
See, it's like scratching the same developmental itch and yet very different cultural meanings.
Mhm.
So what happens? If you're a boy with a toy car, what is the play space? Take the car out of the garage, take it into the house and explore a huge space. More entrenchment of the spatial awarenesses, right?
Yeah.
What does the Barbie doll do in the dollhouse?
Gotta stay home.
Every time I go to scratch the itch of spatial awareness, my end game is go in there and talk to Ken and figure out what's going on in our family. It's like,
So it's like, so if I can interject for a second, it's like when children are learning to play, it's like the implication that like boys, you must go discover, girls, you must like sort of like sequester yourselves at home.
Boys discover and girls discover.
Discover, yeah, in a very small environment.
Now remember, that's before that hormonal soup even kicks in.
Yeah.
So when it finally kicks in, we see boys and girls go boom, different directions.
Mm.
And it becomes very uncomfortable to have any problem with where you're supposed to be headed. Okay, so that was just about physical.
Yeah.
I touched on, we have three spectra? Three spectra.
Spectrum.
So we have the physical,
Hmm.
genitals, connections. Mostly, these are pretty binary. I mean, most humans are pretty comfortable on one side or the other of their physicality. As you mentioned, there's intersex, there's other differences, and we're all in between. Like, we're all different sizes, different levels of testosterone, different whatever. Estrogen.
Hmm.
Then we've got the gendering. And I started in on that with like the toys and the messages. How does one become? Like you've got a female or male sex tendency, right? You're there. What about gender? Well, gender is far more amorphous. Gender is much more spectrumized. You know what I mean? Like, it's way different. And we don't think of it that way, but it is. Just I don't even think we need to get into it. It's just, you fit, it's a different thing. You want to know how different it is? Because people are like, well, it's so different that it has a different word for it. That's how different. So gender and sex are different things. Okay. And those words mean different things.
Right.
So genders between your ears has nothing to do with your twig and berries or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we have tied on to male and femaleness is our sexuality. Mm-hmm. So men who are, you can be a man who loves men or women or whomever. You can be a woman who loves men or women or whomever, and all different variations of all three things, and they all mix up differently.
Yeah.
And they all influence each other. So then the reason I did all that is because it's important if we're going to talk about how one learns to be a man. In what context?
Right. It's like you can't understand the reality if you don't understand the theory first.
Right.
Yeah.
So I throw the question back to you. In what context are we exploring the development of what it is? You said role models?
Yeah. Like people in your life that you may have learned from.
You learn from, but that's the problem is, I know I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, I know.
You learn from every single person you meet and every single person you observe.
So, okay, let me frame it a little differently then.
I'm not trying to make it hard.
No. I think this is important because, like, Tony, you're my first interview. So, like, you're also helping me, like, refine these questions too.
Yeah.
So let me frame it this way then. Who was the first person who told you, be a man?
Those words?
In those words, or something within that vein.
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
Because it would have been happening so young. Right. If I can help, if you're looking for refinement, how about I know what kind of things you're looking to know, and I can just maybe, I think the question is, what does it mean to me for one to be a man?
Yes. And that's the thrust of what I want to get at.
And how did I form that? How did I form that definition for myself? And how did I try to meet it or not meet it?
Yes, that is exactly what I would like to know.
It's funny because I knew you were going to ask me something about this, and I still, even having thought about it a little bit before, I don't know how I learned it or where or when it started. I think I wasn't a guy who had access to, a snuggly, loving, supportive dad. I have dads. I have a couple dads. I have a mom, but I have a couple dads too. And it's just that in the moments where one would have a stereotypical or archetypal relationship to a father, those were times in my life where I didn't have access to that. And I think, so for me, it was more just what people expected me to live up to in terms of like a school, kids on the playground, the comments people make about, oh, you're going to be so strong. And, it's all more like an amalgam of a lot of comments. Now, what it means to me mostly to be a man now and how I'm learning that, for me, it's because as you can see, I've done a lot of thinking on the subject of maleness and femaleness.
And I think
And I
it's
think,
important, like within the field of American culture studies too. Like,
I mean, you really cannot escape it.
yeah,
But I think largely, if largely, it's become a function of age
mhm,
more so than interests. I never feel unmanly, and I never feel particularly manly. I don't feel like I have to fix things
yeah,
in the house, like some of the stereotypical grown man things. I don't feel the need to, even things like hold the door for
yeah.
a woman. I feel like, we all got this. Like, you don't need help opening
Like
a door.
everybody does that, you know. If someone's like right behind you, you just hold the door. It's what you do.
But I do things like that. I do those accultured things out of, if I think that person, if it has meaning for that person,
Mhm.
it's no skin off my nose.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if it has meaning for you, I would gladly open the door for you. But I don't tie it up with my own sense of obligation and manhood. I'm not throwing my jacket over a puddle for anyone. Like that kind of thing.
So would you
Uh,
say that you almost like don't feel the need to like prove anything to anyone else at this point?
right. I really don't. Not in a way that's tied to manhood. Now, sometimes I feel like I would like to be able to fight someone.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, that's, yeah, I think everybody at some level wants to be able to fight someone.
right.
Yeah.
Right. But I have a very real relationship to that because I'm fascinated with martial arts, and I studied it in my youth, and I pretty much know where I stand, and for the most part I'm a lover. You have to have some kind of motivation to make the deep commitment of fighting a person,
Oh, yeah.
and I never want to hurt anyone bad enough to make that commitment.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I'm in that same boat, you know, like, I'll be watching just like, you know, the highlight reels of like whatever fight. And then just like at the end, everyone's just like faces ripped open. I'm like, no, definitely not.
I was watching. I was listening to an interview with a martial artist named Angela Hill,
Hmm.
who just lost a contest, and she definitely won. By the way, she was robbed. Everybody knows it. She was robbed.
What
And
organization does she fight for or
what's
fight with?
that?
What org does she like fight under or like?
She's a UFC fighter.
Okay.
She just fought Claudia Gadelha.
Oh, just this past weekend?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
But anyway, she was saying, they were like, is Claudia really that hard to take down? Is she as tough as they say? Or no, it was like, is her strength what people said? And she's like, well, it's not really about that. And they're like, what do you mean? And she said she's big, but we all weigh in that weight class. So yeah, she's big, but she's desperate. And so there's like this thing where it's like, people don't win fights because they're more manly
Right.
or because they're stronger, right?
Right.
Which we attach to being manly. They're just more desperate.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the series Fight World on Netflix?
Yeah, that's I can't remember the guy's name now.
Frank Grillo.
Yeah, Frank Grillo.
Yeah.
Well, Frank Grillo, he knows his thing. He knows a lot about boxing and stuff.
Yeah. When you mentioned desperate or desperation, my immediate thought was the first episode where he's like talking with all the Mexican boxers.
Yeah.
They're all talking about it's just like it's what we have to do. Like we must do it to like get out.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. There's also, it's kind of a two-edged sword there because there's the usual, suffering of the Mexican people,
Yeah.
partly due to our ridiculous fake drug wars and such. But also there is, when it comes to boxing, Mexico and Mexican boxers have a style. Being a Mexican fighter,
Forward, forward, forward.
yeah, it's a very particular thing, and it sucks because a lot of times people who don't know about who haven't heard a lot of people talk about boxing will make an assumption, and it may have racist overtones to it, but it is something adopted in Mexico and spoken about by Mexican fighters. But they will talk about we must fight like a Mexican,
Mhm.
and in America that has this whole other context where,
We have
because
that whole
if I said, yeah, that guy's fighting like a Mexican, people are like, dude, what are you?
yeah,
It just sounds bad when you live in a country as racist
like
as
exactly.
ours. But
Like, yeah,
in Mexico, to fight like a Mexican is like, it's like an American, oh, at least I know I'm free. In Mexico, it's like, yeah, but I'm going to fight like a Mexican. You know what I mean? Like
like
it's a
no fear and just like give back harder than what you get.
kind of, yeah. But anyway, I forgot how we got on that. Oh, desperate,
Yeah,
right? Oh. So how do I define being a man then?
yeah,
At this point, I do associate, if we're talking about what differentiates my identity from the identity of someone who might not
yeah,
identify as being a man, I it's I just don't think there's that much difference.
right.
Like when it comes to what I strive to be, I think that's of value to me, that I'm striving to be something better than I am.
Mm,
And I value that in others too.
yeah, just like the will to like make the like constructive change in one's life, the will to like make it to the next level,
Right.
the will to achieve the next achievable goal.
Yeah. And what I think about is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't hold very many traits outside of the physical that are just kind of like, this is what I got.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like there's no point in focusing on my physical form
Yeah,
in terms of, I know that people surgically do that, but it doesn't trip my trigger to change my body
correct.
uh, in that way. So what is the differentiator? Nothing. I mean, I really just feel like if I'm friends with someone who identifies as female, or identifies as a woman who is female, I I want them to strive for greatness, and I want them to be the best version of whatever. I know people get really bent out of shape around folks who have all these different gender pronouns and blah blah blah. And I frankly, I just really don't care. Like, I mean, why in God's name would I care what somebody wants to be called?
Yeah, like literally what impact does that person wanting to be addressed as like Miss or Mr. or Mix or Z,
Yeah,
or, that doesn't, it's literally 5 seconds, right?
I think when people that are scared of that kind of thing, not scared, but just not in, they feel like it's a bridge too far in our awareness. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that there is there often in the language there seems to be some fear that something will be taken. I want to preserve the American family, and so I don't want gays getting married, right?
yeah,
I want to. I don't want people telling me what pronoun. And I think it all comes back to a little bit of, will this rub off on me in terms of not the gayness
mm,
or the different pronounness.
yeah,
I'm not saying people with different pronouns are gay. I'm saying it's a different thing.
right,
But I think there's a similar fear attached to each. Like, if I have to call you Zemzer, whatever, someone's going to make me go by a special pronoun.
yeah. But it's like nobody's saying that those people have to take the different pronouns. They know who they are, and that's the important thing.
But au contraire, I who fear it am basically telling you that you can't be Zer because you do need to be a different pronoun. So it's like backwards
Yeah,
thing.
I saw like I think it was like last Christmas season. There was like this article that came out that like Santa Claus as a concept is like, non-binary, like as like male or female or anything in between. And on in the comment section for this, I saw a comment from a dude who was like a mall Santa. And he was like, I know my gender. I am Santa Claus. It's like, okay, cool.
So I think that there are corrections and overcorrections. I think that this is good because you found a fissure in my logic, because I do think that narratives of, characters and such do kind of have a gender and a personality and everything. And it's not okay. So there was Marvel made a black Spider-Man at one point.
Yeah, it was, and he was also Miles Morales, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And people flipped out a little bit. Well, the thing is, okay, so that's one example of a character where the time in the historical time of it, there's no reason why he couldn't be a black kid in Brooklyn in modern day, right? With Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
The whole story of Spider-Man can be a black character, and there's no reason why it couldn't be if you're going to set it in modern times.
Right.
Everything still fits.
The core of the nerdy teenager, the supportive uncle,
yeah,
and some sort of tragedy.
You can't, it wouldn't make sense if you were setting the story in 1952 and he's supposed to be a science, the kid is supposed to be a science prodigy. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have allowed, you can't do that in a segregated America and have a black character be working with top scientists as a teenager. It just wouldn't make sense. There are other characters. So in other words, but Spider-Man in a modern day could be that. Now, if you had a character like Magneto,
right, who's like completely tied to being a Holocaust survivor,
he has to be a Holocaust survivor, and so you can't make him German. You can't make him a German Aryan or something.
Right, because that's just not that character.
Right. So it just doesn't. It wouldn't work. And Black Panther should probably be a black guy.
Yeah, either American or African.
Yeah. Frankly, Captain America, if set in his time, should be a white guy. However, if you're going to start from scratch and make a Captain America now, I think if I'm an artist, I try to draw up a Captain America that is the sum total of the population of America. Like I kind of make him a little bit ambiguous.
Right.
But back then, if the purpose of the character was about American identity at that time, American identity was a homogenous thing. It was a homogenous thing, for better or worse. And so if you're going to make a Captain America of the 50s, you can't reinvent what America was.
Right. Because
when I say that, I'm not saying that America didn't have plenty of black and brown humans. What I'm saying is, for better or worse, Captain America in the 50s was a white dude.
Yeah. Like the hegemonic power and the like cultural influence of just like everything that came before Captain America led up to that character in that interpretation.
Captain America isn't America. Captain America is nationalism. Nationalism in the 50s was definitely a white dude. Mm-hmm. So if you change it, you're not just diminishing a character, you're diminishing our ability to criticize America of the 50s. So it's not as potent as a historical device.
Gotcha.
I think it'd be awesome to see an off-white, kind of ambiguous.
Yeah.
I want someone to walk up to Captain America and say, "What are you?"
Ooh. Maybe someone who's like maybe a light-skinned black guy or a Latino guy or maybe even Middle Eastern descent?
I think you don't know.
Yeah, just like somewhere within a skin tone that could like shift.
In
Like,
2020 America, there are a lot of groups that should be able to project themselves onto America because we're reinventing America.
so to follow with the Captain America logic, maybe that would be someone who looks a bit like Vin Diesel, perhaps.
See, you're thinking film. I'm thinking of drawing.
Oh, well, like that would be like the inspiration, like a Vin Diesel type person.
I don't even want to say a name because then you attach it to whatever that actor is.
And there's
I
that
want it even more loose.
definitely. Hey,
And someday, maybe he'll have an androgynous. He'll be Captain Androgynous America.
that's a really good thought for us to leave it at for today, I think.